Chapter 1. Married in secret to the CEO for 6 years, he still wouldn't allow our son to call him dad. After he missed our son's birthday again because of his secretary, I finally pulled out the divorce papers and left with my son for good. The man who was always calm and cold suddenly lost control, storming into the office, demanding to know where I had gone. But this time, my son and I would never look back. Manager Green, I'll be going abroad for studies next month. Here's my resignation letter. The manager looked at me in surprise. Why so sudden? I had already prepared my explanation. The child's father is in Australia. I plan to take my son there so we can reunite as a family. The manager nodded. That's good. Raising a child alone here must have been tough. Honestly, we always thought you were a single mother. I gave a faint smile. I wasn't before, but soon, I would be. As I stepped out of the office, I ran into Ethan Page and Sophia Taylor. Ethan Page was my boss and also the father of my child. 7 years ago, I was his personal secretary. After one drunken night, we had a child together. To this day, we've been secretly married for 6 years. And for 6 years, he hasn't allowed our son to call him dad. Ethan Page walked slowly, as if deliberately taking care of the woman beside him. Sophia Taylor held a report in one hand while gently clutching the corner of his suit jacket with the other, a scene so sweet it was blinding. As we passed each other, my heart tightened. I couldn't hold back and called his name, Ethan. He stopped in his tracks, his gaze icy cold. Assistant Carter. The polite yet distant way he addressed me carried an implicit warning, as if to remind me, this is the office. We are merely superior and subordinate. I understood his meaning, suppressing all the emotions in my heart, and smiled. CEO Page. Ethan Page let out a hum, his steps uninterrupted, as if he had just passed by a stranger. I smiled bitterly, swallowing the words I had intended to say about resigning. After all, he wouldn't care. The phone screen lit up with a message from my son sent through his smartwatch. Mom, will Dad come home to celebrate my birthday? I froze, instinctively turning my head. At that moment, I saw Ethan Page lowering his head, gently speaking to Sophia Taylor. Someone walked past, and he instinctively pulled her into his arms, his gaze filled with tenderness he couldn't hide. Swallowing the bitterness in my chest, I still sent him a message. Today is our son's birthday. Are you free tonight? Across the hallway, I saw him pick up his phone, only to set it down in less than 3 seconds, his expression unchanging. Looking at the empty chat screen without a reply, I smirked. Evelyn Carter, haven't you woken up yet? You already know that cold heart can't bring you warmth, so what are you still hoping for? Putting my phone back in my pocket, I took a deep breath and walked away decisively. Ethan Page, your freedom is coming. Leaving the company, I headed straight to the kindergarten to pick up my son. The moment he saw me, the first thing he asked was, Mom, today is my birthday. The second thing, Mom, will Dad celebrate my birthday with me? Amid the bustling street, my eyes reddened for a moment. Your dad, he. Before I could finish, the phone rang. Finally, Ethan Page found the time to respond. If you're free, come home. A sudden wave of joy surged through me, and I couldn't help but nod repeatedly. Don't worry, Page. Dad will come home. My son clapped his hands, excitedly jumping into my arms. 6 years of marriage, and this was the first time Ethan Page agreed to spend time celebrating our son's birthday. That evening, I prepared a table full of delicious dishes, and my son finished his homework early. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. On my phone, I kept sending message after message to check. But as always, no reply came. My son seemed to understand something, glancing at me cautiously. Mom, is Dad too busy? My heart ached. I wanted to explain, but no words came out. In the end, I could only smile and say, it's okay. Mom will always be here with you. My son didn't ask further, obediently picking up his birthday hat. Mom, can you help me put it on? I nodded, just about to act when I accidentally noticed a new post on Sophia Taylor's personal page. Today was amazing, I really enjoyed it. Accompanying the caption was a photo of a dish from an upscale restaurant. Even though her face wasn't visible, I recognized the wedding ring in the upper right corner of the photo. The very ring Ethan Page and I had carefully chosen for our marriage. But he always wore it on the little finger of his left hand. To him, it symbolized being single. How ironic. The ring meant to represent marriage had become a sign of his independence. On our son's 6th birthday, he was having a candlelit dinner with his lover at a luxurious restaurant. All the bitterness in my heart suddenly turned into calm acceptance. I liked the post, then put my phone down. Turning back, I helped my son put on his birthday hat. Theo Page, happy birthday, sweetheart. Under the candlelight, my son closed his eyes, clasped his hands together. My birthday wish is to always stay with Mom. I picked up my phone and captured the moment. The thought of leaving, long buried in my heart, had now grown into an unshakable resolve. All right, I promise you, I said. That night, neither of us mentioned Ethan Page again. It was as if, all along, this family had only consisted of the two of us. After my son fell asleep, I took out the divorce papers I had prepared beforehand from the drawer. The last traces of hesitation in my heart dissolved completely. At 2 a.m., Ethan Page finally came home. Seeing the birthday cake on the table, a flicker of guilt passed through his eyes. Sorry, I forgot. I felt amused. The constant reminder messages on the phone, did he really not notice? Or was it the sweetness of his new love that made him forget everything? I took out the divorce papers, flipped to the last page, and, trying to stay calm, handed them to him. Sign here. Before I could finish my sentence, Ethan Page's phone rang. Sophia Taylor's slightly panicked voice came through. Mr. Page, I think the power's out at my house. Can you come over? I'm really scared. Ethan Page immediately stood up, his eyes filled with concern. Wait for me, I'll be right there. Hanging up the phone, he didn't even bother to look as he signed the paper. I took a step back, silently watching him leave. Ethan Page, remember this well. You were the one who didn't need this family. Chapter 2. The next day, I returned to the company to hand over my work. Ethan Page approached me proactively, handing me a gift box delicately wrapped. A birthday gift for Theo Page. I forgot to give it to him yesterday. I paused slightly, took the box, and opened it. Inside was a toy shaped like a dog. My son is most afraid of dogs. When he was 5, Ethan Page once took him to an amusement park. But midway through, because he ran into some friends, he let go of my son's hand and stopped watching him. The little boy got lost in the crowd. When he was found, he was so terrified that he sat curled up on the roadside after being scared by a stray dog. Since then, dogs have become an unforgettable nightmare for my son. And yet, the person who caused all of this now considers it a suitable gift. I wasn't sure if I felt more anger or disappointment, so I casually set the box aside. My voice was calm. Thank you. Ethan Page looked at me with a strange expression, as if pondering something, and then said, Sophia's house lost power, so I'm planning to let her temporarily stay at our place. Don't go to work today. Go home, pack up some things, and take our son out to stay somewhere else for a few days. A simple sentence, yet it felt like a sledgehammer, striking directly at my heart. I couldn't believe it and stared at him intently. Are you saying you want to kick me and our son out of the house because of Sophia Taylor? Ethan Page frowned. Don't put it that way. It's only temporary. We agreed to keep our marriage a secret, so naturally, we need to avoid raising any suspicions among colleagues. I let out a cold laugh, finding it utterly ridiculous. Is it really just about being colleagues? Is it really just to avoid suspicion? Or does he think my son and I are obstacles to his love life, and he no longer wants to see us? Not wanting to continue facing him, I sat back down at my desk, trying to focus. Got it. I will quickly pack up, take my child, and leave. I won't disturb you and her. Leaving is inevitable, what difference does it make whether it's sooner or later? Seeing me agree so swiftly, Ethan Page seemed a bit surprised. He parted his lips, his voice unusually soft, "I'll make it up to you and the child." I didn't look up, remaining silent. The damage had been done, no amount of compensation could erase it. When I got home, I packed up and took my child to leave. The moment I opened the door, I came face to face with Ethan Page, who was returning with Sophia Taylor. He was pulling her suitcase with one hand, exuding strength and elegance. In that brief moment of confrontation, I clearly saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. Sophia Taylor, startled, blurted out, "Assistant Carter, why are you at President Page's house?" Hearing this, I immediately pulled my son behind me, shielding him from her gaze. They are just relatives staying temporarily," I said, but Ethan Page interrupted me, gripping the suitcase handle tighter. This wasn't the first time. Every time I heard it, my heart felt like it was being stabbed. I was about to speak when my son spoke first. "Hello, Uncle." I couldn't believe it. I turned to look at my son, only to see his reddened eyes. "Mom, let's go." All the words I wanted to say got stuck in my throat. I forced a smile and softly replied, "All right." As we passed each other, Ethan Page suddenly grabbed my hand. He looked at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Theo Page, what did he just call me?" I let out a bitter laugh, feeling the irony. "Isn't this exactly what you always wanted, CEO Page?" 6 years of a secret marriage, and Ethan Page not only refused to make our relationship public, but he also never let our son call him Dad. The only difference now was, before, he forced our son to call him Uncle. Now, it was my son who wanted to sever ties with him. I lowered my head, trying to free my hand from his grip, but I couldn't. His gaze was complicated as he looked at me. "Give me a few days. I'll explain to Theo Page." I reminded him, "Sophia Taylor is waiting for you." "Let go." As if waking from a trance, he reluctantly released my hand, though his face was full of longing. I sneered, holding my son's hand and preparing to leave. Suddenly, he called out, "Wait." He hurried back to the car and brought out a box of cake, handing it to me. "Happy birthday, Theo Page." At that moment, Sophia Taylor spoke up, her tone perfectly composed. "Actually, this is the cake the CEO bought for me. What a coincidence that it happens to be your son's birthday. Assistant Carter, I hope you don't mind." The cake in my hand suddenly felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. I wanted to return the box of cake, but then I saw the joy sparkling in my son's eyes. My heart softened, and in the end, I stopped myself. My son, oblivious to the conflicts among adults, simply looked at Ethan Page with hopeful eyes. "Uncle, can you eat the cake with me?" Ethan Page hesitated for just a moment before nodding in agreement. My son cheered, running straight into the living room and urging me to open the cake. I patted his head and quickly began slicing the cake. But the smile on my face froze the moment I took the first bite. "Spit it out. Don't eat it." I panicked, snatching the piece of cake from my son's hand, my face filled with worry. Ethan Page immediately frowned. "Evelyn Carter, are you out of your mind?" I looked up, my eyes red with tears. "Theo Page is allergic to mangoes. Didn't you know?" As soon as the words left my mouth, panic became evident on his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Another apology. Since the day my son was born, I've lost count of how many times I've heard apologies like this. My son seemed to understand as well. He stood there, staring blankly at Ethan Page, his eyes now devoid of any hope. "It's okay. They didn't know, it's normal." After speaking, my son buried his face in my chest, refusing to look up at him anymore. Without hesitation, I carried my son, stood up, and left the house. Even as I stepped out of the villa, I could still feel Ethan Page's gaze, filled with guilt and panic. But this time, my son and I no longer felt anything. Leaving the house, I went to the company and quickly packed up my belongings in the office. Initially, I planned to say a proper goodbye, but now it seemed unnecessary. Placing the signed divorce papers on the desk, I let out a light sigh of relief. Carrying our luggage, my son and I headed to the airport. Before boarding the plane, I asked my son, "Mom is taking you away. Are you angry with me?" My son shook his head and pressed his cheek against mine. "I only need you, Mom." Finally, my tears flowed. All the pain in my heart transformed into relief at that moment. I took out my phone and blocked all contact with Ethan Page. Ethan Page, we will never meet again. The next morning, Ethan Page arrived at the office on time. After what happened yesterday, he couldn't shake off the unease in his heart. When he opened his email, a newly approved letter appeared at the top of the list. A resignation letter? Chapter 3. Looking at the 4 bold words in the email subject line, an unsettling feeling suddenly swept over Ethan Page. He was about to open the email to check when the graceful Sophia Taylor walked into the room. "Director Page, here's the report from last time." She placed the document on the table, then habitually moved around to stand behind him, placing her hands on his shoulders. Previously, this action subtly hinted at an ambiguous relationship between the two. But now, Ethan Page felt uncomfortable. He sat upright and began flipping through the document. After just reading the first page, he frowned. The entire content on the page, apart from the formatting, was almost entirely incorrect. Even the department name was typed wrong. He suddenly slammed the document onto the table, his voice icy. "Who made this report? Do they lack even basic skills? Call Manager Green here immediately. What kind of work is HR doing?" Sophia Taylor's face instantly turned pale. "Director Page, I made this report." All his anger extinguished in an instant. Looking at her frightened expression, for the first time, Ethan Page felt a sense of helplessness rising within him. Sophia Taylor's tearful eyes looked at him as she spoke in a soft, trembling voice. "Director Page, do you think I'm just too stupid?" She wiped her tears, her stubborn demeanor as fragile as a white flower. "If you truly think I'm foolish, then I'll leave. You can find a smarter, more capable secretary." After speaking, she turned to walk out. Instinctively, Ethan Page stopped her. But when faced with her pitiful gaze, he froze. Evelyn Carter would never look at him like that. She was always proud and dignified. No matter what challenges she faced, she always found ways to solve them on her own, unlike Sophia Taylor. If Evelyn Carter were still here. His hand, which had started to loosen, clenched again, and that sudden thought startled Ethan Page. As if in panic, he released Sophia Taylor's hand, rubbed his forehead wearily, and said, "Go out for now." Sophia Taylor wanted to say more. "Director Page. Leave." His voice grew impatient, turning cold. Sophia Taylor bit her lip, but in the end, unwillingly walked out. After she left, Ethan Page sat back down at his desk. Looking at the error-filled report, countless old memories flooded his mind. 7 years ago, she was just a fresh recruit, inexperienced, without an impressive academic background. Among so many talented candidates, she wasn't the most outstanding one. But in the end, she was the only one who passed the internship. At that time, Evelyn Carter was brimming with enthusiasm, undeterred by challenges. If she didn't know how to write a report, she would persistently seek guidance from senior colleagues in the company. If she didn't understand the workflow, she would always carry a notebook to jot down notes anytime, anywhere. Whenever he needed her, she would appear as quickly as possible, offering the best solutions. Even at business parties, she would promptly memorize the characteristics of every attendee. Back then, the phrase she said most often was, "Director Page, I promise I'll do better next time." If the secretary job were graded, she would undoubtedly score a perfect mark. Ethan Page still remembers that as long as he brought Evelyn Carter along, everyone admired him for having such an exceptional secretary. But unfortunately, everything was ruined by that night. After that fateful night full of mistakes, everything changed. To this day, Ethan Page still doesn't understand why she lowered herself, trying every way to end up in bed with him. He only knows that the next morning, waking up to find Evelyn Carter lying beside him, all his admiration for her instantly turned into hatred. The more he had admired her, the more he despised her afterward. Therefore, even later, when they had to marry because of the child, he still couldn't treat her well. He even deliberately sought someone like Sophia Taylor, completely opposite to her, as a way to rebel against the marriage. But now, when thinking about Sophia Taylor's increasing outrageousness, Ethan Page suddenly felt a sense of emptiness. The image of her and their child walking away with a resolute back lingered in his mind, making his heart race. Perhaps he should stop his childish behavior. Perhaps, after all these years, she has changed. Perhaps. At 6 p.m., Ethan Page took Sophia Taylor to attend a dinner party hosted by a business partner. The whole day without seeing me, he held a glass of wine, his mind restless. Did I go too far this time? That question suddenly flashed through his mind. He pressed his lips together, drained the glass of wine, and picked up his phone, intending to text me. But just at that moment, the business partner approached, interrupting his thought. Director Page, about the proposal from last time. Ethan Page paused slightly, quickly setting aside his other thoughts, focusing on work. While everyone was chatting happily, a voice that didn't suit the atmosphere suddenly cut in. Director Page, this dessert is so delicious. Sophia Taylor held a chocolate cupcake, her eyes clear and innocent as she looked at him. The conversation was interrupted, and everyone's expressions showed slight displeasure. Yet Sophia Taylor remained oblivious, smiling brightly as she walked up to Ethan Page, holding the cupcake close to his mouth. Ethan Page didn't pay attention, letting chocolate and cream smear all over his face. Sophia Taylor panicked, hurriedly reaching out to wipe it off for him. But Ethan Page unexpectedly took a large step back, as if avoiding something terrifying. Enough. Sophia Taylor froze, her eyes instantly welling up with tears. Director Page, what's wrong with you? You weren't like this before. Ethan Page took a deep breath, about to say something, but the strange looks from those around him made him stop. Looking at him, General Manager Evans, the business partner, forced an awkward smile. Director Page, you can attend to your matters first. Let's discuss the proposal another time. The others chimed in as well. That's right, let's leave it for next time. Go ahead and handle your business. After speaking, everyone quickly left. Ethan Page had no reason and no suitable excuse to stop them. A serious business negotiation had been turned into an embarrassing farce by Sophia Taylor. He couldn't bear to imagine how the business world would gossip about him after this incident. And as expected, after leaving the banquet, General Manager Evans, along with a few other partners, found a place to chat, and the main topic of their conversation was none other than Ethan Page. TSK, what do you all think? Could Director Page have some peculiar preferences? General Manager Evans, a man in his 50s, couldn't help but speak up first. General Manager Brown chimed in, maybe that's just what young people are into these days. General Manager Evans shook his head, still puzzled. In the past, Secretary Carter was so excellent, intelligent, capable, and, most importantly, very perceptive. I really don't understand why she hasn't left Starline Enterprises. I've tried inviting her to work for me several times, but it's always been unsuccessful. General Manager Brown smiled, without saying a word. In fact, he had also tried to recruit me before, but he failed as well. On the other side, Ethan Page glared at Sophia Taylor, his chest heaving with anger. Sophia Taylor, look at what you've done. Sophia Taylor's eyes turned red, as if she had just endured a great grievance. Director Page, what did I do wrong? I just wanted to share with you. How is that a mistake? The more she spoke, the more her voice choked, and she even began to sob. The scene quickly caught the curious gazes of those around them. Ethan Page had no choice. Though fury burned within him, he couldn't lose his temper in front of everyone. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to remain composed. It's not your fault, it's mine. Ethan Page closed his eyes, the glass of wine in his hand nearly crushed under his grip. Thinking he was no longer angry, Sophia Taylor wiped her tears and cheerfully threw herself into his arms. "Director Page, you're so kind." Ethan Page's eyes grew vacant. Deep inside, he regretted choosing someone as foolish as Sophia Taylor to rebel against his marriage. Chapter 4. Worried that Sophia Taylor would continue ruining the atmosphere, Ethan Page refrained from joining any further conversations for the rest of the party. Occasionally, someone would approach to chat, but he only responded with a few polite, brief remarks. For most of the time, he sat alone on a sofa in the corner of the room, drinking one glass of wine after another. It was with great difficulty that he waited until the party ended. After bidding farewell to the host, he quickly left as if fleeing. Upon arriving home, the alcohol began to take effect. Ethan Page leaned on the doorframe, unsteady, and pushed the door open. "Evelyn Carter, bring me some water." After speaking, the entire room fell silent. He lifted his head, staring into the dark living room, and only then did he realize they had left yesterday. Both she and their son were gone. Turning on the lights, he walked into the kitchen. Opening the fridge, he grabbed a can of soda. As he closed the door, he noticed that the fridge was now covered with stickers of various sizes. Most were of cartoon characters beloved by children. Looking at the drawings he once considered childish, Ethan Page suddenly let out a faint chuckle. In his mind, a memory surfaced, Theo Page sneaking into his study. The boy had been clutching a children's book, timidly approaching him and asking, "Uncle, can you read with me?" And how had he responded? Ethan Page paused mid-sip, his gaze darkening. He had replied, "Uncle is very busy and doesn't have time." Thinking about it, an inexplicable sense of frustration welled up in his heart. He grabbed his phone, unable to resist sending me a message. "Send me your address. I'll come to pick you and the child up tomorrow." After typing it out, he felt it wasn't quite right and rephrased, "Where have you and the child been these past few days? I'll personally come to pick you up tomorrow." Taking a deep breath, Ethan Page pressed send. But the very next moment, a glaring notification popped up. "The user's account has enabled friend verification. You are not yet friends with this user. Please send a friend request first, and once accepted, you can send messages." Bang! A can of soda dropped to the ground. Ethan Page frowned, almost panicking as he opened the workgroup chat. Nothing, still nothing. In the company's group of hundreds of people, he scrolled through repeatedly but couldn't find her profile picture. Could it be that she had left the group? No, impossible. Evelyn Carter hadn't submitted a resignation letter, so how could she leave the workgroup? Ethan Page let out a faint laugh, but it looked forced and uneasy. Thinking about the resignation email he hadn't opened that morning, the unease in his chest only grew stronger. Hesitating for just a second, he immediately called the HR manager. "Hello?" The other end of the line was filled with noisy sounds, as if the whole family was watching TV. Through the speakerphone, Ethan Page could even hear the tender voice of a child. "Dad, the cartoon is about to start." Manager Young let out an "ah" sound, then seemed to move to a quieter place. "Hello, Director Page? Is there something you need to instruct me on?" The deep voice of the man pulled Ethan Page, who had been distracted, back to reality. "Nothing much, I just wanted to ask why Evelyn Carter is no longer in the workgroup." Manager Young was momentarily stunned but quickly replied, "Assistant Carter has resigned." "When?" Ethan Page nearly shouted, almost losing his balance. Manager Young hurriedly explained, "The morning before yesterday, Assistant Carter submitted her resignation letter. She said her husband had been reassigned to work in Australia, and she wanted to take her child to reunite with the family, as well as pursue further studies." Assistant Carter was very determined. "I followed the procedures, reported, and approved it." "Director Page, you didn't know?" Hearing this, Ethan Page clenched his hand tighter, barely suppressing a cold laugh. He didn't even know Evelyn Carter had a husband working in Australia? Just as he was about to lose his temper, the child's voice suddenly rang out over the phone, "Dad, why haven't you come out to watch TV with me yet?" Manager Young's comforting voice followed, "Wait a moment, my love, Daddy's almost done. Can you wait a little longer for me?" Perhaps this is an innate ability of parents. The moment they face their children, their voices soften instantly. Ethan Page froze, quietly listening to the voice on the phone. For some reason, it reminded him of Theo Page. In truth, he once had a happy family too. But it seemed he was the one who had let it slip away with his own hands. That night, Ethan Page sat on the kitchen floor all night. It was the first time he had ever felt so wretched. In the past, no matter how late he came home, there was always a light left on for him. There was always someone sitting on the sofa, quietly waiting for his return. Now, all of that was gone. The vast mansion was now just him, alone, waiting for dawn. The next morning, Ethan Page didn't bother changing his clothes, and went straight to the office. When he pushed open the office door, my workspace had already been tidied up. It was so clean that it stung his eyes. On the desk, a thin stack of documents was neatly placed. Like a Pandora's box waiting to be opened. His trembling hands flipped to the first page, and the bold letters struck his eyes. Due to irreconcilable differences, both parties acknowledge that the marital relationship has broken down beyond repair. Both parties have agreed and voluntarily signed the divorce agreement as follows. Party A, Ethan Page. Party B, Evelyn Carter. So, you've truly decided to leave me. Ethan Page let out a bitter laugh, but his eyes reddened. He had thought about leaving countless times, but he never imagined that the one to decide first would be her. Even more unexpected, it turned out that the one who couldn't let go was himself. Gripping the divorce agreement, he turned around immediately. He had to go to Australia, he had to find her. He needed to ask her, to understand. He was the one who first wanted to get closer to her, why would she now leave without saying a word? The more he thought about it, the faster Ethan Page's steps became. He stormed out, his face dark, accidentally bumping into a woman wearing an overpowering scent of perfume. Director Page? Oh, where are you headed in such a hurry? Last night, you didn't take me home, so I had to stay at a hotel. I'm mad at you. Sophia Taylor stood in front of him, pouting as she spoke. Get lost. Ethan Page didn't even bother to look at the annoying woman, replying coldly. Sophia Taylor froze for a moment, then stomped her foot. Director Page. What are you saying? If you keep acting like this, I'll really be upset. Get lost. Ethan Page repeated, his icy gaze seemingly freezing her in place. Sophia Taylor wanted to say more, but he brusquely pushed her aside and walked away. As he walked, he made a phone call, and the words she overheard left her stunned. Hello? Find out Evelyn Carter's current address for me. Also, book me a flight to Australia today. Australia. Today was Theo Page's first day of school. I woke up early to prepare his school bag. Although we had only been in Australia for 2 days, I had been planning this for a long time. Half a year ago, I contacted a friend working in Australia to help me find a suitable house and school, preparing for the divorce. Initially, I hadn't intended to leave so soon, but I was used to planning ahead for everything. Looking back now, it was that habit that saved me from being caught off guard. I also have to thank Ethan Page for having at least a shred of decency. During our marriage, he was never stingy with money. Watching Theo Page get on the school bus, I pulled my coat tighter around me and turned to head back home. A familiar voice suddenly called out. Evelyn. I stiffened and turned around, and just as I had guessed, it was Ethan Page. He looked far more haggard than before. His clothes were wrinkled, and his chin was covered in scruffy stubble. Yet, despite that, he was still incredibly handsome. In the past, it was precisely this appearance that had captivated me. No one knew that the reason I applied for an interview at Starline Enterprises was because of him. He was my senior, 3 years ahead of me. Just one fleeting glance during the freshman welcome ceremony had stolen my heart completely. I didn't come from a prestigious background, nor did I possess exceptional looks. The only things I had were diligence and intelligence. That's why, during my 4 years of college, I worked tirelessly, studying, taking exams, and interning. All just to earn the chance to interview at Starline Enterprises. So that, in the end, I could proudly stand before him and say my name. It took me 5 years to get close to him. But it only took him one night to turn all my efforts into nothing. I smirked faintly, trying to hold on to a shred of dignity as an adult. Chapter 5. Opening the door, I didn't look back. Come in, have a seat. Ethan Page's eyes lit up as he immediately followed me. 2 sugars, no milk. Placing the cup of coffee in front of him, I sat down on the sofa opposite. His voice was hoarse. You still remember? I smiled without replying. You've come to see me, so you must have already seen the divorce agreement, right? I don't need half the assets. The only thing I want is custody of Theo Page. His breath hitched, his gaze fixed on me. Evelyn Carter, I don't agree to the divorce. I nodded, unsurprised, as I had already anticipated this. That's fine, I can wait. A 3-year separation works too. Ethan Page slammed the coffee cup onto the table, the dull thud echoing with irritation. Evelyn Carter, do you really want to leave me that badly? Don't forget, 6 years ago, you were the one who climbed into my bed. A dull ache surged through my heart. I stared at him in disbelief, finally understanding everything. Huh. So, all these years, that's what you thought. No wonder you changed your attitude the morning after. At first, I thought it was because you didn't cherish what you had achieved. Now I understand, from the very beginning, you've always thought that way. I felt disappointed, but more than that, I felt relieved. Lowering my head, I gently swirled the coffee cup in my hand, my voice calm and quiet. Ethan Page, have you ever considered that maybe I was the one who was harmed? He stared at me, stunned. What are you saying? I recalled that night. That night, Ethan Page was drunk, and I helped him into the reserved suite. After helping him wash his face briefly, I placed a glass of warm water on the bedside table and prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, he suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled me hard onto the bed. That night, I struggled, I screamed, but it was all in vain. I had secretly loved Ethan Page for 4 years, but I never imagined one day everything would begin this way. After that night, I spent an entire evening convincing myself. It's okay. It's not a big deal. You love him, don't you? But I didn't expect Ethan Page to remember nothing. It's just as well. Because of that, I kept telling myself it wasn't a wound. Closing my eyes, when I opened them again, only calmness remained. What's in the past should stay in the past. Ethan Page, please don't disturb my life anymore, okay? Ethan Page opened his mouth to speak, but his mind was in turmoil. What do you mean by that? Nothing at all. I'm busy, so please leave. Ethan Page left. Before leaving, he only said one sentence: I don't agree to the divorce. Once I've thought it through, I'll come back for you. I didn't pay much attention and stayed in Australia to officially begin my academic life. No longer needing to work, I had more time to spend with Theo Page. The little boy gradually forgot the sadness of the past and made many new friends locally. During that period, I dated a few people, but never wanted to take it as far as marriage. Ethan Page occasionally flew to Australia to visit Theo Page. Perhaps he wanted to make up for the father-son bond that had been damaged. I once asked Theo Page for his opinion, and when he agreed, I didn't refuse Ethan's visits. After all, Theo Page is his son, so I might as well take advantage of his resources. Ethan Page seemed to remember something. For a while, he kept transferring money to me. Occasionally visiting Theo Page, he would look at me with eyes full of regret. I didn't care. When the money came, I accepted it but never stopped dating others. He's now just a small part of the story of my life, no longer having any influence on me. So, you see, the sky will brighten eventually. Even without the sun, it still brightens.